Well, good morning. Good to have you here. So today we are on week 2 of a 3-week sermon series called Step Out, Step In, Step Up. And it's kind of examining how do we restart our lives given the year that we've been through. And so we're going to look at a number of Bible stories that help us kind of look at that and decide, all right, that help us think through restarting our lives. Last week, if you weren't here, we looked at the story of Peter who stepped out of the boat and walked on water for a little while until he looked around and saw the storm, and then he cried out, "Lord, save me," and Jesus saved him. And we looked at how, we need to be stepping out. When we talked last week about how it's okay to be where we are. It's okay if we're still a little fearful or overwhelmed or angry or wherever we are. It's okay to be where we are, and it's okay for other people to be where they are. But all of us need to step out towards Jesus. Now, if you missed last week, you can go on our website or YouTube channel. You can watch last week as well. But this week, we're going to look at a different Bible story. But before we get there, I want to share with you some results. So at the end of last week's sermon, I asked us all to look at 6 questions, do a little self-assessment with 6 questions, and there was the option that you could actually punch in your answers on your phone, and thankfully, nearly 400 of you did that, so we got a little assessment of how we're doing, and which influences and helps us think through what we're going to talk about today. So I want to share with you just 3 answers that you guys gave to us, and one of the first questions was, how do you rate your day-to-day life? And it was all the way from 0 of struggling to thriving. And the results, as you can see up there, about 20% of us said we're struggling. Like things are not going the way we'd like. 35% were thriving, things are doing well. And 45%, almost half of us, we put in the middle there, I labeled that was my label of blah, all right? Like just kind of like, well, I'm not thriving, but I'm not struggling either. I'm just kind of blah and in the middle. All right, the question number 3 was, is your passion to follow Jesus growing? And about 14% of us said, not so much right now. Now, 66% of us, 2/3 of us said, yeah, absolutely. My passion is there. I'm excited. And again, there were about 21% of us that were a little bit in the middle there, a little kind of blah, a little bit. And then another question that we asked, the 4th question was, how much are negative emotions like anxiety and anger and fear affecting our life? 43% of us said all the time. Like it's really impacting our lives. 25% rarely, and 35% said sometimes. So if you add those two, like 75% of us said, hey, these negative emotions, they're impacting me quite a bit. So I'll tell you what my takeaway was, all right? My big takeaway was this. My big takeaway was that we are passionate about following Jesus, right? We saw that. I mean, almost 90% of us are, we're really kind of pretty passionate about following Jesus. We want to do it. We want to follow Jesus with our lives, but we're not living it out as well as we would like. We're not thriving as much as we like. Our negative emotions are kind of impacting us more than we'd like. And so we want to do it, but it's just not quite there. And so this morning, I want to look at a Bible passage that helps us think through, okay, well, how do we actually do that? How do we fully step in to following Jesus with our lives, to live it out in the way that we want to? And we're going to look at a passage from the book of Joshua. Now, if you're not as familiar with the book of Joshua, it's in the Old Testament, and it's called Joshua because it's mostly about this guy named Joshua, and which is a great name, by the way. And so we're going to look at a really kind of famous story in the life of Joshua. But just to give us a little bit of background of understanding of where the book of Joshua falls in the history of things, we got a little 1-minute video that helps introduce it. Let's watch this 1-minute video.
The book of Joshua. Let's back up and remember the story so far. So God chose Abraham, and then his family became the people of Israel, who are then enslaved down in Egypt. And so through Moses, God rescued Israel out of Egypt. He made a covenant with them at Mount Sinai, and he brought them through the wilderness. So Israel then camped outside the promised land, and Moses called them to obey God's commands so that they could show all the other nations what God is like. The book of Joshua picks up right after Moses has died, and Israel's ready to enter the land. So the story of Joshua is designed with four main movements. Joshua first leads Israel into the promised land, and then once they're there, they meet all this hostility from the Canaanites, and so they engage them in battle. Then after their victories, Joshua divides up the promised land as the inheritance for the 12 tribes, and then the book concludes with these final speeches that Joshua gives to the people.
All right, you got it? Yeah, all right, that was a good little introduction there, right? So that sets the scene of where we are, the book of Joshua. Now, today we are actually going to look at the very end, right? What this video called kind of the final speeches. It's at the end of this kind of story of Joshua leading people all the way, through amazing kind of hardships, and actually they're in a good place. So we're going to start with Joshua chapter 23, verse 1. Now, we don't have time to read all of chapters 23 and 24, so I'd encourage you, if you got time this week, go read that in Joshua. We're just going to read, it's kind of a little excerpts from both of those chapters this morning, all right? So Joshua 23, chapter 23, verse 1 says this: After a long time had passed, and the Lord had given Israel rest from all their enemies around them, Joshua, by then a very old man, summoned all Israel, their elders and leaders and judges and officials, and said to them, I am very old. You yourselves have seen everything the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake. It was the Lord your God who fought for you. Be very strong. Be careful to obey all that is written in the book of law of Moses without turning aside to the left or to the right. Do not associate with these nations that remain among you. Do not invoke their names of their gods or swear by them. You must not serve them or bow down to them, but you are to hold fast to the Lord your God as you have until now. All right. So this is what basically Joshua says to them. He goes, he reminds them, hey, look what God has done for you. God has led you through all these things. And in fact, the beginning of chapter 24 that we're not going to read, Joshua goes through and kind of reminds them of some amazing, really hard times that they've been through, but how God is with them. He talks about how they were slaves in Egypt, and life was really hard, but God led them out of that. You remember the stories of things like plagues and crossing the Red Sea. Then he talks about how they wandered in the desert for 40 years. Life was tough in the desert, but God was with them, provided food like manna and quail, things like that. And he talks about how they went into the promised land and things were rough. There were battles and fights, but God was with them. And the story of Jericho and them walking around the walls and the walls coming down. So he reminds them of how life was hard, but God was with them. And then he says, now things are all right. Things are going pretty well, which I think is why this is sort of an interesting time for us to read this passage, because we've been through some kind of rough times. And as a church, we've talked over and over, and hey, God's been with us. God's been with us. And now we're starting to move into times that seem to be a little better. So I think this is really kind of important for us right now. So let's look at the end of chapter 24, where Joshua gives a challenge to his people. Chapter 24, verses 14 and 15 say this. Joshua says this: Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt. Serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. So the challenge that Joshua puts forth to his people is choose who you will serve. Choose who you will serve. And I think that God is actually giving us that same challenge today. Right? He's saying to us, hey, as we kind of restart our lives, as we think about how we're going to be doing things, we need to choose who we are going to serve. And what's interesting is in this passage, Joshua kind of compares a couple things. He tells his people, he says, hey, you have the option of choose what God you're going to serve. You can choose to serve these false gods, or you can choose to serve the one true God. As we look at this today, I think the same challenge is to us. Now, some of you may be saying, well, like, what are the false gods? Are there false gods today? Like, my neighbors aren't really sacrificing to Baal. I don't know who the false gods are. Well, there are many false gods today. And the truth is, as we restart our lives, we have to choose who we are going to serve. Now, for instance, one of the things, and this was evident even before the pandemic, but I think it was made greater by it, is there is a God of fear in our society today. Like, levels of anxiety were already crazy even before the pandemic and today. And so one of the things God is saying, hey, who are you going to choose? Are you going to choose to serve the one God, or are you going to choose to serve the God of fear? Now, I know that's a little bit of an oversimplification to just say, hey, I'm going to choose not to fear, but it does start there. It starts with saying, you know what? I'm going to choose God. I'm going to choose that God. I think there's another God that's out there a lot. I struggle with this one. It's the false god of sort of leisure and entertainment. I love myself some Netflix and sports. I do. You can ask me what sport thing is going on. I'll tell you. I know what the latest sports scores are, and I love them. Now, the question is, how much am I serving those gods versus the one true God? How about the God of things, money? It's easy to say, all right, I have to do this because I need this car, this house, or these other things that I feel like I need. How about the God of approval? Right? How many of us, our self-worth is based upon what other people think? And if we hear this criticism, it just crushes us, right? Can we say, you know what, I'm going to choose to follow the one true God, not the God of getting approval from other people? And I could go on to gods of success and busyness and comfort and sex and all these other false gods that are out there. And so as we kind of restart our lives, God is saying to us, hey, choose you this day whom you will serve. So here's what I believe. If I were to put this kind of challenge in today's language for us, if I were to put this in today's language for us, here's what I believe it would say. It would say that we all need to take the initiative and intentionally prioritize a godly rhythm of life. Let me say that again. Take the initiative and intentionally prioritize a godly rhythm of life. Now, let me break down this statement and kind of got three sections. I want to start at the end. The end says a godly rhythm of life. I would define a godly rhythm of life as spending the right amount of time doing the right things, thinking the right thoughts with the right people. The right amount of time, the right things, right thoughts, right people. As we restart our lives, we got to think about what things are we going to be spending time on. That's changed in the past year. What are the right things to spend my time on? Where is it? And then with whom? Right? Who are the right people that I should be spending time around as I restart my lives? And then the thoughts. What are the right thoughts and how do I develop those? Well, we'll get there in just a minute. So let's talk about the next phrase. Intentionally prioritize. As we restart our lives, all these other gods, these false gods, they're going to be calling out to us. They're going to be saying, hey, you should spend your time here. You should spend your time with this people because they help you in this area. The question we have to ask ourselves is, are we intentionally prioritizing a godly rhythm or not? I like to say that we don't accidentally follow God. You don't accidentally love and serve other people. You don't accidentally pray and worship. We don't accidentally serve God. Our sinful nature and individualistic culture pull us away from God. So if we actually want to choose a godly rhythm, we have to intentionally prioritize that. It doesn't just happen by accident. A great example of this, again, is looking at little kids. You don't have to teach a 2-year-old to be selfish. A 2-year-old will naturally grab the toy it wants from the other kid. And if it's one of my kids, probably because they're related to me, it'll take that kid and hit the other, or take that toy and hit the other kid with it, right? You don't have to teach a 2-year-old to be selfish. And to be honest, we say that to 2-year-olds, but the same is true of adults. You don't have to teach adults to be selfish. You don't have to teach adults to be insecure. You don't have to teach adults to be anxious. It happens. And so if we want to intentionally prioritize a godly rhythm of life, we have to intentionally choose. We have to choose to make that a priority. Now, the last one says, take the initiative. Ultimately, you and I, we have to take the initiative. No one else can prioritize your spiritual life for you. No one else can make the choices of how you're going to spend your time, who you're going to spend it with, the thoughts you're going to have. No one else can do that for you. That is something you have to take the initiative on your own. I know it's not always easy. Again, you have other things calling for you. Your boss says, hey, you should spend your time here. Some certain family members or friends say, you should spend your time here. The question is, the challenge that God's putting for us through Joshua is to say, who are we going to choose to serve today? Let's get back to that definition of a godly rhythm. A godly rhythm is spending the right amount of time doing the right things, thinking the right thoughts with the right people. So the challenge this morning is for us to intentionally prioritize, to do things in all three of those areas: right thoughts, right people, right things. To choose to serve the Lord with a godly rhythm of life. Let's look at those three things. Right thoughts. How do you develop the right thoughts? Right? If it's not something that happens naturally, my thoughts naturally go to selfishness. My thoughts naturally go to things like anger or being upset, insecurity. That's where my natural thoughts go. So if my natural thoughts don't go towards a godly rhythm, what do I have to do? Well, first of all, I got to worship. I need to spend time worshiping. Coming to church regularly is so important because it helps refocus. Caleb mentioned it as we started this service that, hey, coming to worship on Sunday morning helps me start my week off by focusing on what is most important, who God is and what that means to me. If I don't do that on a regular basis, then my mind is not going to think the thoughts that I wanted to think. And then beyond just doing this once a week, we got to daily spend time with God. Daily. We've got to figure out how to spend time with God on a daily basis to help us think the right things. Right thoughts. Now, how about the right people? Well, first of all, you need to take initiative to finding the right people. The reason that we have groups at the church, you hear us as a church talk all the time about how you need to get involved in a group, you need to join this. It's not that we just love running groups. It's that we know this is essential to a godly rhythm of life. To be around people who encourage us, who build us up. If we are trying to live with a godly rhythm without other people encouraging us and building into us and spending time with them, and without us expending and serving them and sacrificing of ourselves to serve other people, if we don't do that on a regular basis, we will not be living that godly rhythm that we want to live. And so my encouragement to all of us is take the initiative and find the people. Join a group. We've got a couple that are starting up here over the summer. You talked about we have sermon discussion groups that meet right after the service. We have one that's kind of exploring introduction to Christianity. Go to the website and find those. That's a great way you can do it. Or just take the initiative. You may know someone and you may know, you know what? I need to spend time with them. I haven't seen them in a long time because of whatever reasons. I need to prioritize spending time. And I will also say, it may not be the person that you kind of thought. Sometimes we think, it's the perfect person. They're going to be my best friend. They're going to be in the same life stage as me. They're going to be doing everything. No, it may be someone who challenges you. It may be someone who looks different than you. It may be someone who has a different kind of political views than you, that you get to spend time to be around. And as you do, it helps you grow. That's what God is calling us to do. That's how we live a godly rhythm. Find the right people to be around and take the initiative. Don't sit back and go, okay, if someone else comes and find me, that'd be great. No, you take the initiative. Find the right people to be around who grow you spiritually and sometimes challenge you, sometimes encourage you, but grow you spiritually. I've been in ministry 20 years, and I've seen thousands of people grow, thousands of people. It's amazing what I've seen when I look back at my life in ministry. It's amazing the amount of people I've seen and the life transformation. I've also seen a lot of people kind of languish. Stay in. Remember we talked at the beginning about that kind of blah stage? I've seen people stay in that for years. And one of the biggest factors in taking someone from languishing to growing spiritually is them intentionally choosing to be around people. To find someone to go, you know what, I like their spiritual life. I want to be like them, and they take the initiative. So my encouragement to you is find the people to be around. And then finally, the right things. Doing the right things. To look at your life and say, hey, am I doing things? Paulini mentioned here that there's opportunities to serve. Often when you're serving, you also find some of the right people to be around. And it changes the way you think. These things all work together to build a godly rhythm of life that we saw, like 90% of us we have a passion to follow Jesus more. So are we intentionally choosing to spend our lives in a way that will build that godly rhythm? My encouragement to you is that you take the time this week to find one of those right people and to talk through, hey, what's my life look like? What is my rhythm? Am I spending the time with the right people, thinking the right thoughts, doing the right thing? And then what can I do to help build that? That's what Joshua challenged his people. Like Joshua says, choose you this day whom you will serve. That's the challenge we have today.
Thank you for watching Blackrock Church's Sunday service. We're so glad you found us, and we hope this message made you feel more connected to God. In talking about connection, we find that it's super important for people to be connected to others and to community in order to grow in their faith. So if you're in the area, we invite you to join us to worship in a service. You can find out about our times and locations right here on this webpage. We'd also love to help you connect in a group and find people who can walk alongside you as you continue deepening your understanding and faith. And after you get to know us, you might even like to use your gifts to serve on a team. We believe God gave each of us unique gifts that we can use to serve those around us. One body with many different parts. If you're not able to be here in person, don't worry. We have a great online community and many ways for you to join in virtually and talk to us throughout the week. You can also stay in touch on our website, YouTube channel, Facebook, and Instagram. By visiting our website, you can also easily give your offering one time as an online gift or a reoccurring gift. Just click Give at the top. The Bible tells us that tithing is an important part of our relationship with Jesus, and we want to continue to trust God with our lives and our finances. Well, we are so glad you made the choice to get to know us and view one of our services. We hope that you join us next week. Thanks so much for watching.